Hi and welcome back to my channel. This is the second part of the Sewing a VikiSews Sharon dress video. If you haven't yet seen the first one, use the link in the description box. Okay, we've stopped at hemming the dress's facing and now move on to a collar. I used a very thick cotton fabric for a collar. Don't forget to change the collar pattern if you've changed the dress's neckline. I forgot to do it at first, and then had to unsew the collar and cut off some extra fabric. Cut two collar pieces off, an upper and a lower one. The upper one is slightly larger than the lower one. It is totally okay. Moreover, it is done on purpose. You'll understand why a little bit later. As my collar fabric was very thick, I used a light fusible interfacing for it. If your collar fabric is light or medium thick, use a special collar interfacing. And yeah, fuse it to the collar pieces using a hot iron without steam. Pin two collar pieces together right sides inside at their upper edge. Use the marks. As my collar fabric was cotton and thick, the pins left holes in it. So I pinned two layers of fabric pinning parallel the edges, not perpendicular as I would normally do. Stitch with a 1 cm seam allowance. Then cut the lower collar's seam allowance off by 5 or 7 mm. This allows us to remove extra thickness. Press the seam flat, turn the seam allowance to the lower collar and press once again. Make a line of machine stitches 1 cm off the previous seam, thus securing the seam allowance to the lower collar. Turn the seam allowance towards the lower collar and pin the collar's side edges together. Stitch with a 1 cm seam allowance. Press. Cut the lower collar's seam allowance off by 5 or 7 mm and the excess fabric at the corners. Turn the thin out and make its edges neat and its corners sharp with your fingers and a thick needle. Press. Pin the collar's lower edges together and stitch with a 7 mm seam allowance. Pin the collar to the dress's neckline using markings we made earlier. Stitch with a 1 cm seam allowance. Press the seam flat. I use a 4 cm wide cardboard strip to draw a line at the skirt's lower edge. Then tuck this edge to the wrong side towards the line and press. Roll the edge inward once again and press. Then I finally connect the bodice with the skirt. I pin them together right sides inside and stitch with a 1 cm seam allowance. Then hem the edges with an overlock. Press the seam flat, turn the seam allowances upwards and press again. Pin the facing to the dress using marks all the way round, from bottom to collar and to bottom again. I also made chalk lines for more precise stitching at the dress's button stand upper edge. Stitch with a 1 cm seam allowance. Pay special attention to the skirt's bottom. Stitch all the way up and then down, starting and then stopping 2 cm away from the bottom. Then stitch parallel to the bottom till the facing's edge, as it is shown in the video. Press the seam flat. Cut the facing's seam allowance off by 5 mm and also remove the excess fabric at the corners as it is shown in the video. Make a cut at the button stand's upper edge, not reaching the corner by 2 mm. Repeat this for the other side. Cut the dress's neckline seam allowance several times. This will also help us when turning the facing out. Press the seam allowance to the facing. Turn the facing out and make its edges neat and its corners sharp with your fingers and a thick needle. Press. I pinned the skirt's folded bottom seam allowance and top stitched it by 1 cm off the edge. Press the seam with an iron. Top stitch the facing at the collar area 5 mm off the collar. Press. As I changed the neckline earlier, I had to add 2 extra buttons to the dress. Thus the distance between my buttons was 5.7 cm. Buttonholes should begin 3 mm before the 4-part central line. I also hand sewed the facing to the shoulder seams and the waistline seam allowance. I pinned the facing to the button stand to be on the safe side. As usual, I use a special foot to make the buttonholes. Then I secure and hide all extra threads inside the fabric layers. Don't forget to remove the pins. I also like to press the freshly made buttonholes with an iron. Then I cut the buttonholes through. I sewed on 9 buttons. And that's it! Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching! See you in my next videos! Bye!